Once, Rome's legions marched from the deserts of Africa to the misty forests of Germania. Once, emperors ruled the known world from marble palaces, their word law, their empire eternal. But now, Rome is silent. Its walls stand broken, its aqueducts run dry. The eagle of Rome, once feared across continents, lies trampled in the mud. The empire that claimed it would last 1,000 years has crumbled in less than 5 centuries, and in its ruins, chaos reigns. Gaul, the heartland of Roman civilization in the west, is a shattered corpse. Its cities abandoned, its villas burned, its proud senators reduced to beggars. Where roads once carried merchants and soldiers, now only wolves and warbands prowl, and into this void march the barbarians, Visigoths, Burgundians, Vandals, names whispered like curses by the last Romans clinging to their fading world. But among them, one tribe will rise above all others, the Franks, savage in battle, cunning in rule, baptized in blood and faith alike. From the forests of the Rhine, they will carve out a kingdom from the corpse of Rome, a kingdom built not on marble and law, but on steel, betrayal, and the will to conquer. They were once called barbarians, but soon they would be called kings, and their empire would reshape the destiny of Europe. When the last emperor of Rome was dethroned in 476 AD, the world did not end in fire. It ended in silence. The thunder of legions, gone. The voice of emperors, silenced. The beating heart of the empire, stilled. Across Gaul, the land Rome had once conquered and tamed, decay spread like a plague. The great Roman roads, which once carried armies, merchants and governors, now crumbled beneath weeds and roots. Grand amphitheatres became lairs for wolves. Marble villas stood hollow, their walls blackened by fire, their statues toppled into the dust. The people, the Romans who once ruled these lands, were left abandoned. With no legions to defend them, they clung to scraps of survival, turning farmers into fighters and villages into fortresses. But nature abhors a vacuum, and where Rome's authority collapsed, others rushed to seize it. The Visigoths had carved their kingdom in the south. The Burgundians seized the valleys of the Rhone. The Alemanni prowled the east, hungry for plunder, and everywhere raiders poured from the forests, blades dripping with conquest. Gaul was not a land of peace. It was a graveyard of empires and a battlefield of tribes. But in the north, beyond the crumbling frontier of the Rhine, a new people stirred. The Franks. They were not the largest tribe, nor the most organized, but they were restless, fierce. Hardened by the forests and rivers of Germania, their warriors fought with a brutality that made even other barbarians shudder. To the Romans, they were savages. To their enemies, they were wolves at the door. And in the ruins of Gaul, in the ashes of Rome, they would find their destiny. From the forests of the north rose a boy who would carve his name into history. Clovis. Just 15 years old when he took command of the Salian Franks, a people as fractured as the land they roamed. Rival chiefs squabbled for scraps of power. Families turned swords against each other. The tribe teetered on the edge of collapse. But Clovis was not born to preside over ruins. He was born to rule. Even as a youth, he showed no mercy. He crushed rival leaders with a cold precision that shocked even his allies. Those who mocked his age soon found themselves silenced, their heads displayed on spikes, their blood feeding the soil he would claim as his own. Clovis understood something the other Frankish chiefs did not. Power was not given, it was taken. And unity was not forged with oaths and brotherhood, but with steel and fear. Through battle, he bound the Franks together. His warriors followed him not because of tradition, not because of loyalty, but because he gave them what they craved: victory, plunder, and the promise of glory. Yet Clovis was more than a butcher with a crown of iron. He was a hunter of opportunity. He saw Gaul not as a shattered corpse of Rome, but as prey waiting for the kill. And so the boy king sharpened his blade and set his eyes on conquest. The age of Clovis had begun. For years, Clovis ruled by the axe and the sword. His enemies feared him. His allies obeyed him. But fear alone cannot build an empire. Clovis knew that if he was to rule Gaul, he needed something greater than steel. He needed a crown of destiny. That moment came in the heat of battle. His army, pressed by the Alemanni, teetered on the edge of defeat. Desperation clawed at his men. And in that hour, Clovis, the pagan king of the Franks, raised his eyes not to his gods, but to the god of Rome. He swore that if victory was granted, he would abandon his idols and kneel to the god of his wife, the Christian queen Clotilde. And when the dust cleared, the Alemanni lay broken. Victory was his. Clovis kept his vow. In the Cathedral of Reims, beneath vaulted arches and flickering candles, the barbarian warlord walked barefoot to the font. His long hair, the mark of Frankish kings, dripped with the waters of baptism. The bishop proclaimed him a new Constantine, chosen not by tribe or sword, but by heaven itself. His warriors followed, thousands baptized in a single day, their axes now carried in the name of Christ. From that moment, Clovis was more than a conqueror. He was God's king. With the church behind him, he held not only the loyalty of his warriors, but the hearts of the people of Gaul. By blood and by faith, he had forged a new destiny. The barbarian had become a monarch. With faith as his shield and ambition as his sword, Clovis began the march to empire. The first great test came at Soissons. The last Roman commanders still clung to power, desperate to keep Gaul from falling fully into barbarian hands. But Clovis crushed them. His warriors plundered the Roman towns, and from this battle came a tale that would echo through the ages. The vase of Soissons. A golden vessel, claimed by the church, was seized by one of his men. Clovis demanded it be returned. The warrior defied him. Clovis said nothing, until months later, before the gathered army, he split the man's skull with a single blow of his axe. "Thus you did with the vase," he spat. It was a lesson to all. Defy the king, and death will find you. But Soissons was only the beginning. At Vouillers, Clovis turned his fury against the Visigoths. Their king, Alaric II, commanded a realm that stretched across southern Gaul into Hispania. For centuries, the Visigoths had been the masters of the land. But on that field in 507, their power was shattered. Alaric fell, struck down in battle, and the Visigoths fled across the Pyrenees. Gaul was his. Yet conquest did not end on the battlefield. Clovis knew the Frankish way. To rule, he must eliminate every rival, every threat, even within his own bloodline. He invited rival Frankish chiefs to feasts, only to have them slaughtered at the table. Brothers, cousins, allies, all cut down, their lands folded into his kingdom. Through the axe, through the cross, through betrayal and war, Clovis forged the Franks into masters of Gaul. No longer raiders, no longer mere barbarians. Now, a kingdom was born. Clovis had carved a kingdom from the corpse of Rome. But victory breeds fear, and fear breeds betrayal. For Clovis, no rival could be allowed to live. Not a chief, not a cousin, not even a brother. He invited his enemies to banquets, to share wine, to swear friendship. And when they were drunk, when they were unguarded, his men fell upon them with blades. Their blood ran across the feasting tables, their laughter silenced in screams. One by one, the rival kings of the Franks vanished, murdered in halls where they thought themselves safe. Even his own kin were not spared, for Clovis knew that family ties were chains, and chains could be broken. It was said that when his assassins returned from another slaughter, Clovis would sit in silence, eyes cold as steel, and whisper, "How strong has our kingdom become when only I remain?" He ruled not through trust, but through terror. And yet, it worked. By the time of his death in 511, there was no rival left to challenge him. The Franks stood united, not by loyalty or love, but by fear, by blood, and by the ruthless will of their king. But the price of his ambition would be a poisoned legacy. For Clovis left behind not peace, but division. His lands were carved among his sons, and with them came the same shadows of betrayal, the same hunger for blood. The kingdom he built would not collapse, but it would devour itself from within. Clovis was gone, but his shadow lingered. He had united the Franks with the axe and the cross. And yet, at his death, his kingdom was broken apart, not by enemies, not by invaders, but by his own blood. His sons divided the lands of Gaul like scavengers over a corpse, kingdom against kingdom, brother against brother. Alliances forged in the morning were broken by nightfall. This was the age of the Merovingians, the long-haired kings. Their flowing locks marked them as chosen rulers of the Franks, but beneath the hair their dynasty festered. Queens poisoned rivals to place their sons on thrones. Princes hired assassins to strike down their brothers in the dark. Wars were fought not for survival, but for greed, for vanity, for nothing. The chronicles tell of feasts that ended in slaughter, of children strangled in their beds to clear a path to power, of kings so consumed by indulgence that their courts became dens of corruption. And as the centuries passed, the once mighty rulers of Gaul became little more than puppets. Kings in name, but not in power. The true rulers were the men behind the throne, the mayors of the palace, generals and administrators who commanded armies while the Merovingians drank and schemed. The dynasty of Clovis had not yet fallen, but its crown had grown hollow. The long-haired kings wore it like a mask, while others prepared to seize the strength that once made the Franks great. The kingdom stood on the edge of a new transformation, and soon the hammer would fall. The Merovingian kings wore their crowns, but it was another who held the real power, Charles, son of Pepin, the man history would call Martel, the hammer, not a king, not an emperor, but the master of armies, the true hand that ruled the Franks while the long-haired kings wasted away in their palaces. And in the year 732, destiny came for him. From the south, across the Pyrenees, thundered the armies of the Umayyad Caliphate. Veterans of countless wars, hardened by the deserts of Arabia, they swept across Hispania like wildfire. Now their banners of crescent and steel advanced into Gaul itself. For the first time, Christendom trembled. If the Franks fell, there would be no barrier between the Caliphate and the heart of Europe. Charles answered the call. On the plains near Tours, two worlds collided. The Umayyads, masters of the horse and the blade, met the Franks, infantry locked in iron ranks, shields pressed together, unbroken as stone. For 7 days they clashed, The earth shook beneath hooves, the sky darkened with arrows. Again and again the Umayyad cavalry hurled themselves against the Frankish line. But Charles Martel stood firm. Like an anvil before the storm, his warriors would not break. Then, at last, the tide turned. The Frankish axes fell, cutting through the enemy ranks. The Umayyad general was struck down, and their army scattered into the night. The Battle of Tours was won. Europe would not fall. Charles Martel had stopped an empire and saved a faith. He ruled not with a crown, but with the hammer of war. And though he never called himself king, he laid the foundation for something greater. For from his bloodline would rise a man who would shape all of medieval Europe, Charlemagne. From the bloodline of Charles Martel rose a titan, Charlemagne. The name itself would thunder across centuries. Charles the Great, the king who was more than a king, the man who forged a new empire from the wreckage of the old. He inherited a fractured kingdom, torn by rivalries, threatened by Saxons in the north, Lombards in the south, and Saracens beyond the Pyrenees. Where lesser rulers would have faltered, Charlemagne marched. For more than 40 years, his sword never rested. He crushed the Saxons, forcing them to kneel and to embrace the cross. He shattered the Lombards, seizing the crown of Italy. He pushed back the Moors in Spain, and with each conquest, his realm swelled until it stretched from the North Sea to the Alps, from the Atlantic to the heart of Germania. But Charlemagne was not only a conqueror, he was a builder. He summoned scholars to his court at Aachen, breathing life into learning long thought lost. He reformed laws, minted coins, and strengthened the bond between crown and church. And then, on Christmas Day in the year 800, destiny crowned him. In the Basilica of St. Peter's in Rome, as Charlemagne knelt in prayer, Pope Leo III placed upon his head a crown of gold. The barbarian king of the Franks was now Caesar's heir, the first Holy Roman Emperor. In that moment, the world changed. The Empire of Rome was reborn, not in marble palaces, not in senatorial decrees, but in the strength of Frankish arms, in the faith of Christendom, and in the will of one man. From wild tribes of the forests, the Franks had risen to forge the backbone of medieval Europe, and at their heart stood Charlemagne, father of Europe. From the forests of Germania to the cathedrals of Rome, the Franks had walked a path of blood and fire. Once, they were called barbarians, raiders, wolves in the night. But in time, they became kings, emperors, and the builders of a new world. Their kingdom was not forged in marble, nor written in scrolls of law. It was forged in betrayal, in steel, and in faith. And from that crucible came the foundations of medieval Europe, the world we would inherit. It is a tale of ambition and of destiny, of how the ashes of Rome gave birth to an empire greater than the men who built it. And so our story ends here, with the rise of the Franks. Perhaps we will meet again, to walk other roads of history, or perhaps fate will stand between us. But should we cross paths once more, I will be here, waiting to tell the stories time has tried to silence. Until then, remember, history lives not only in books, but in voices, in memories, and in us. If this tale has stirred something within you, I invite you to journey further with me. Subscribe so that we may walk together into the past once more, for there are many more empires to rise and to fall.